you for joining us today. I am going to start just briefly introducing each of our panelists for the Advocacy at All Ages discussion today. And I'll give you just a hint of what they're each going to be sharing with us, but then I will have them each introduce themselves before they dive into their talks. And again, if you have questions for any of them, we'll briefly pause in between each of them for your questions, and then we may have time at the end as well. So pictured on the left, we have Nicky Muller, who is going to be our first speaker, and she'll be sharing a few of her experiences advocating for her daughter, as well as how she includes her daughter, Isla, in some of those activities to help her engage socially and build confidence and start teaching her some basic advocacy skills as well. Then in the middle, we have Patty Pinkham, and Patty will be sharing some various advocacy experiences and challenges that she and Emma had after diagnosis in secondary school and when moving off to college, and the creativity that it took them sometimes back in a time when there wasn't as much support or resources for families with FOP. And then last but definitely not least, we will have Ian Cali, who's pictured on the right. He will be sharing with us his perspective on being raised by a parent who encouraged independence with strong advocacy building parenting style, and what he found worked and maybe didn't work along his journey of becoming a successful independent adult with FOP. So with that, let me stop sharing my screen so that we can get started. All right, Nicky, do you want to go ahead and again make sure that you are all muted, and then we'll have time in between each panelist for questions. So Nicky, start us off.
Okay, thanks Karen, and hi everyone. So my name's Nicky Muller. It was Williams, my daughter's Isla Williams, hence why I've put my name as Nicky Williams, so if there's a confusion. But if you're looking me up on Facebook, I'm Nicky Muller. So I'm mum to Isla, who's now 7, and we live in the UK. Isla was diagnosed with FOP as a baby. She was 3 months old, but actually our advocacy journey started even before she was diagnosed, because I recognized that she had funny toes when she was born. We got them checked out, and we were told, yeah, she probably needs to have some surgery to get them straightened, and we were sent on our way. As she was born over Christmas time, no one got in contact. We didn't hear from a surgeon, and as the first mum, I did what probably all first mums do when they've got a tiny baby at home: you start googling things. So I started looking online, and I wouldn't say particularly quickly, but after some searching on malformed big toes and what they called congenital bunions, so that she was born with bunions, which we know is not a thing. Yeah, anyway, I came across a child, that the image of the girl with FOP, which probably a lot of you have seen, and I knew straight away, looking at the toes, that's what she had. And actually, we then had to convince the doctors that that's what she had. We went to the leading expert in the UK at the time, and desperate for him to say that it wasn't, he said that he wasn't sure, but he didn't think it was, and sent us for blood tests. And then weeks later, and by this point she started to get head flare-ups, she was diagnosed. So a bit different to a lot of other journeys of diagnosis, but very thankful that she was diagnosed at such a young age. One of the first things that I think it was Dr. Kaplan, or one of the doctors, said to me was, you now need to become the expert. So it's up to you to become the expert of this condition, because no one's going to know more about your child and FOP than yourself. And I remember that scared the life out of me, because I'm not medical. I don't know anything. I'm a new mum. I don't even know how to be a mum yet, let alone anything else. And so, yeah, that was really quite scary for me. And I suddenly felt very alone. And I think that was the biggest feeling that I had, was this: I'm on my own. Like, no one knows what I'm going through right now. I've got a brand new baby. I've got a diagnosis of a condition which sounds and looks, when I look on the internet, absolutely horrific. What happens now? Obviously then, you know, over time started to reach out to people and find the community, and Chris, who's on today, and Helen were one of the first people that we spoke to, and actually before diagnosis. And so we very quickly started, you know, speaking to them more, and we were very fortunate that the FOP UK conference was when Isla was 5 months old. So I remember going with my list of questions all prepared, and I've still got that list of questions. I find it quite comical looking at them. And also the other thing that I look back and think was really weird is that I was desperate to hide her toes. So, you know, she was a tiny baby, but I always had like little shoes on her, hiding her toes, because I was like, I just don't want to deal with it. I don't want to see, I just don't want to be reminded that she's got FOP. And that's such contrast to where I am now. And yeah, I look back on that and I mean, I laugh at it because it is so different to where I'm at now, but I totally understand why I felt that way. I was totally overwhelmed and scared, and yeah, I then realised, and through having counselling for other reasons when I was younger, the importance of being able to speak to someone, and actually speaking to someone that's not your family member necessarily, or even your friend, like maybe someone that's external. So that really helped me starting to do some counselling. There's a charity in the UK, or more certainly locally to us, called Home Start, where they come and help with your child, and there's someone to talk to when you've got a young child. And so I reached out to them and they were helping me. So although I was starting to link in with the FOP community, it was those kind of sessions, the counselling and being able to speak out and share my fears, that kind of helped at the beginning. Sadly, my marriage did break down around that time. So Isla was by this point about a year. And the thing that I think I recognised from that, and it's not the reason that the marriage broke down, but was that we certainly dealt with what we were going through very differently. I didn't realise at the time it was grief. And I remember someone saying that to me, and it just like light bulb in my head. Oh my goodness, yes, of course, I'm grieving the child that I thought was going to do all these things and what have you. And yeah, it took some time to get around that. And obviously, you know, being on my own with Isla and her having these flare-ups at this point, a lot of flare-ups, quite significant progression in her FOP, was hard. But I think actually that hard start on our journey propelled me to probably be more proactive in terms of advocating for Isla, and just thinking that, you know, what are my options here? My options are I do nothing, and we're gonna just not gonna get anywhere, or I, you know, try to be as proactive, find out what resources and what I can do to help me, to help Isla, and to start making things a lot more easier on ourselves, like, you know, and so that's kind of where I kind of started with that journey. And I went on holiday actually soon after this time on my own with Isla, which, you know, I was quite brave to go away with a then 2-year-old child on a plane, yeah, for a week. But it was fantastic. I loved it. They had childcare there. She went to the childcare for a few hours. I got to have a bit of time to myself, but then I also met some really great families, and someone who was really poignant at that time taught me a bit about mindfulness and positive thinking, and it really kind of changed again that mindset of, okay, I could kind of just wallow in self-pity, or I could actually turn this into a positive and actually enjoy my child and do whatever I can to make her life the best it possibly can be, and also to make sure we have fun and enjoy ourselves and have the potential to do things that maybe we wouldn't otherwise. So that was really important, and I then met my now husband, so that was also obviously a very positive thing. And He is actually in the medical field. He works for Pfizer, interestingly enough. So he's taken a lot of that medical side, which actually has really helped me as well, so that he understands it a lot more than me. He can get his head around drug trials because that's what he does. Like, you know, he knows that world so much better. So that's been really positive. And then I suppose the other thing that I started to do was thinking, I think when I first got Isla's diagnosis, and I'm sure it's probably the same for a lot of people, especially maybe with younger children, that I kind of just thought, well, that's it. She's not going to be able to, you know, go to school like normal school. She's not going to be able to have the opportunities that any, you know, other children have, etc., etc. And actually, like now, I think she probably has more opportunity and does more than probably most children out there, you know, because she's very determined and wants to do everything, but also because I've realised that I don't need to say no. Like, why say no? Like, and actually quite often I now say to Isla, okay, so how are we going to do this? And give her the control over that. So that's been really, really helpful. We also spend time with other children with other conditions. So we've got a friend at her school who's got spina bifida, so mobility issues, but it's different. He's got a different condition, but actually, you know, we get a lot of comfort talking to each other and sharing experiences, and that's been really positive for us. There's been some charities, for example, the Children with Special Needs Foundation. They've been great in, so it's a local charity. So they provided her trike for her. So she's got an adapted trike, which she can ride, although her neck, shoulders, elbows are all locked, and she's got severe scoliosis. She can ride her trike independently. And I was saying to Karen earlier, we've just also put the adaption on where you take off the front bit and then you put it on the back of an adult bike. So she was tearing around the field the other day with James, which was good fun. So that's been great. I think there was a lot of, I think the admin side of things was very overwhelming. I knew I had to do it. So for example, here in the UK, to get disability, it's called disability living allowance. I'm sure there's different versions of that in different countries, but you have to fill out a form, which is hellish. And even more hellish when you fill it out and they lose it in the post, which they did on mine. And then have to do it again. So and also those forms are so hard to fill out because you have to put the worst possible situation. You have to always think of, you know, the worst case scenarios, which I found always very hard, but knew I had to do. And same for getting, you know, like a disabled badge and things like that. So all of those things we put into place, it kind of has made our life a lot easier. It just means that, you know we can park in that disabled bay and not have to walk to get to Legoland or wherever we're going. So that's been really positive. So moving on about Isla's experience with FOP, and, you know, it's again very personal on how people approach it with their children. And I just chose to be very open with Isla and not, you know, but not giving her, like, she doesn't need to know details, but we always said that she had special bones. And so from a very young age, she knew she had special bones. And so even at school now, she'll refer to having special bones. We also would try to make anything like a hospital visit or something that, you know, average child doesn't have to necessarily do like she does. Then we try to make them really positive. So, you know, for example, we always go to McDonald's after we've had blood tests, or you know, just silly things like that, which seem to work well for her. And then I'm also now encouraging her more to speak up. We had a music therapist, We've actually stopped it. I mean, she loved it. It was music and art, and it was fantastic. But we're going to start again. She's about to start a new school in September, and we'll start again. But it was a really great way of her being able to, like I said, for me, sharing my fears and frustrations and worries with someone external. She gets to do that through these sessions. So that's been really positive. And some of the things that have come out of those sessions have really helped me to kind of approach her in the right way and know what matters to her. And most of all, it's friendships, to be honest. That's the thing that's massive to her, is family and friendships. And that's the thing with kids, is that you forget that actually their worlds, you know, it's the small things that count. And like, I think we sometimes think, oh, you know, we need to do all these big glamorous activities and what have you, but actually it's the really small things. And I think, you know, now the world's lived through COVID, and I think a lot of people are beginning to realise that, and the importance of family and you know, being at home, just being happy at home. So yeah, so going on and into kind of what we've done with Isla. So we adapted our home. So we've done quite a lot of things to help make her independent at home. So we've got a lift, for example. She has a sink that's at the right height so that she can wash her hands and things. I hope in the future we'll be able to do more things independently. She's very, very determined. So, you know, there's definitely no lack of her kind of wanting to do things, which is positive, but I realise that could change as she gets older. So at the moment we do horse riding with the Riding for the Disabled. She's got a trike, as I mentioned. Do hydrotherapy. Obviously the water's amazing for people with FOP. And she also does brownies. So I don't know if you have that in your countries, but it's like Scouts for girls. So it's unfortunately been on Zoom recently, which she's not as keen on, but that's been another kind of thing. And I think also to have friendships in different pockets. I always think it's good to have not just your school friends. So that's been a kind of positive thing. At school, one thing I wanted to mention, which I think Isla came up with, is that, so obviously like PE and sports classes, she can't really participate in the way that other children were doing. And so she worked out that if she took her cuddly toy with her, and at the moment she has a monkey, so her monkey does, like, they're doing star jumps, monkey does the star jumps. And like on sports day, she likes to either be the judge or take the photos or that kind of thing. So and yeah, she's lucky, she's got some amazing friends, but I think because the way she is and the way that she is so determined, and I think that helps that they don't look at her differently. We went tubing, or donutting as they call it here, at the weekend, and you know, all the kids are on their donuts on their own, and there's me with Isla on the donut holding on to her, and it was just so lovely because these boys were like, you know, quite kind of like trying to be cool boys, and they were going, Isla, we want to go with you, let's race you, Isla. And it was as if I wasn't there. They wanted to be with her, and I thought that was really nice. And yeah, it meant a lot for me to see that and realise that she's starting, you know, she's seen as her own person, and that's the end of the day. Like, yes, she's got FOP, but she's Isla, and so I'm glad that that's coming out of her, and that, yeah, she's finding her way. And yeah, I just hope that continues. I'm realised time's getting short, but I think that in summary, the things that I would say have been like I don't know, maybe the top 5 things is 1, speak out. Like, do not be afraid to speak out, because like pretty much always people want to help, and that might be in the community, it could be your friends, it could be someone you've never met before, but people do want to help generally, and You know, just by speaking out, sometimes it can help share the load. Take each day at a time and try not to worry about what you can't control. You know, as I said, takes pleasure in the small things. At the beginning, I always was thinking about, oh, what happens when, you know, this happens, or what if that, and you just can't live like that. And FOP has really taught me that. Thinking outside the box, so problem solving, always trying to find new ways to do things. That there's always ways to do things. It's just trying to apply that and think of it maybe just differently. Positivity. So I'm not always positive, but I try my best to be positive and see the positive on things. You know, I try to, you know, if I'm having a bad day, at least think of 2 things that are positive before I go to bed, or that I'm thankful for, or so yeah, that. And then finally, the power of our community. So, you know, I don't think as a community we necessarily realize how incredible the FOP community is. And if you research any rare disease which is anywhere near as rare as FOP, you'll very quickly realize there is nothing like what we have. It's very, very, very rare. And so, you know, I'm very thankful for that. I'm very thankful that I've got to meet other FOPers. As I said, when Isla was 5 months old, I met, I don't know, probably 30 odd FOPers of different ages who I continue to stay in contact with, who have been incredibly inspirational, but also showed me that this journey doesn't need to be all doom and gloom at all. You know, it's not the journey that we necessarily thought that we'd have for our children, but it's definitely going to be a good one. And you know, if we take each day and try and make the most of what we've got today, and and advocate wherever we can.
Perfect. Thank you, Nikki. Do we have any pressing questions, or should we move on and save questions for the end? Is there anyone that has something specific for Nikki? Okay, we'll just keep moving along, because I know it's the stories that are actually the best to be here and listen to. So Patty, if you want to go next and kind of share what advocacy kind of looked like at a different time, when maybe there weren't so many resources and families to connect with.
Yeah, it's nice to see everybody. So I'm Patty Pinkham, the mother of Emma Albee. We live in Maine, in a small town. It's quite small, which has got its good and bad points. So I sort of grew up with some struggles. So I always had to live life on my own. My parents died very young. I always had to be tough. And so went to college late, had 2 girls, Emma and Sarah, and felt like, how lucky am I? I mean, everything fell in place when I was 30. I was on top of the world. And then that FOP diagnosis came. Emma got her diagnosis at age 9.5 in 1998. So Emma was a kid who was very content kid, very easy, you know, a tomboy, but she was an introvert. She had good friends, just very quiet, easy. When FOP came along, it really derailed us. I have to say, mostly me. I think Emma accepted everything easier than I did, because that's the way it is sometimes. And I was scared of being responsible for this big burden of FOP. It was hard. We did, right off the bat, connect with other FOPers. So we did hear, like I think most of you have, we did hear that FOPers have lives that are full and happy. that they had a strong will, good character, determination. There was all kinds of just inspirational things that were told to me by many of them. And I'll always remember them because it gave me just great direction right there at the beginning. Just made me know that, oh, this is all worth it. You know, it's going to be challenging, but let's just go forth. And so Emma's story, within 9 months, she was in a wheelchair. She just had unrelenting flare-ups. And so, you know, her shoulders back, elbows, everything, and then the hips flared. So she was in 4th grade. She was in a wheelchair by spring. So this kind of introverted, shy kid all of a sudden was front and center. She could not hide that she had a disability. She was right there. And so I think that always bothered her and bothered me. I would be at an event and see her sitting with the kindergartners at the gym because all of her classmates were up high. And I don't know, it would make me angry and frustrated and sad, but Emma said, well, I can't think of a solution. So she just went forth. But for me, I would carry it longer. It would just be harder for me. Maybe it made the situation easier that Emma was so accepting and so easygoing. But I worried that she needed that strong will that people had told me about, and she needed that determination and all that stuff that was going to make it so she could go forth on her own and advocate and turn into an adult that was happy. So this was all, you know, that first year when I was still overwhelmed with everything. And so I just was determined that we just needed to advocate and we needed to inform ourselves. So at that time, it was mostly me. So I did that, educating myself on all of her rights and joined support groups. We had a nice one locally that had lots of weekend retreats where there were speakers that talked. And it was nice to be part of that, to hear other people's stories. None of them were the same as FOP, really, but yet they all advocated for their kids. So it was nice to be supported by that. Of course, joined the IFOPA, but it was different back then. There wasn't so much immediate social connection. I think what was hardest for us was maybe trying to figure out what things were worth fighting for, what things were worth putting a lot of energy into advocating for, because she was, you know, then going into middle school. And there was lots of instances where she missed out on a lot. She missed out on a lot of things that the others were doing, and which things had to happen because there was no solution, which things were important enough to her to fight for. That was all a learning experience for me and for her. And it took us quite a while to get that together. But it was hard for us to feel confident that we were being assertive in advocating for her. And we feel like too many people portrayed us as being aggressive. That's a quick thing that happens in this world, I feel, that even my husband felt like anytime we spoke up, we were being aggressive. It scared him. And we had to really learn, how do you help to solve? How do you speak up and do it? So, just, I guess I'll talk about some instances that happened to us, because over the years, because I'm not the best at explaining what I mean about some stuff. So, I mean, in the earliest years, I think I advocated mostly for Emma because she was so quiet and she was glad to let me do it all, which was scary, but at the beginning, that's the way it was. I had to advocate for her with the medical doctors a lot. For instance, she was told that she did not need a power chair because she would never be independent enough to need that. So, I had that confidence to quickly move ahead and start the ball rolling, get the right person in there that, switch doctors. This was an orthopedic doctor saying this, and it ended up being our oncologist that was the one that advocated that, oh no, Emma's gonna go on to have an independent life. She needs the best, but I quickly learned when to get somebody else to step in. And school systems, Emma was often denied because of the complication of wheelchairs, of course. But sometimes the school would approach it that they would tell Emma that they were not sending her on the trip before they would let me know. And they would entice her with study halls and crafts. And of course, crafts, that means Emma's tickled to death to miss this field trip because she can stay behind and spend all day doing a craft. I knew what she was missing out on, that the water quality studies that they were going to do on a local pond were going to excite her to pursue science. So I would push, they would say, deny it. I often stepped in and did things that maybe some people perceived it as aggressive, but I thought was being assertive. I would call the coordinator and find out if he had a canoe with a motor on it, and he'd say, yes, I'll bring it with me, and Emma would show up for the field trip. And it was important that she did those things. I knew her. I knew what was going to be important in her future. Emma knew those things, but other people in the world don't know your kid as much as you and the child does, So I knew what was going to change her world. I think I did. I pushed her. But anyways, I had to step in quite a bit. And I think of it as advocating for her. We met a lot of walls, a lot of people that saw the easiest way out maybe, and so they didn't make it work for her. But I think we all have to advocate for our kids, whether they have FOP or not. We all have to look at our kids' strengths and make it work. Always, I talked everything through with Emma. It was always us as a team. She was quite mature at age 10 and 11. I think she grew up because of FOP. She didn't get to act silly or reckless like the other kids. So instead, she maybe, I don't know, she just grew up fast. She was able to think things through. When she got to high school, I stepped back a lot because I was so worried that her introverted, quiet lifestyle was going to mean that she wouldn't speak up much. And so I really stepped back, and she didn't really tell me anything about her day. I know she faced challenges because, people that worked in the school would tell me things they knew Emma had happened, and they worried about her. But if Emma didn't say anything, I didn't bring it up. She fended for herself a lot. And her guidance counselor, when she graduated, said that She was the strongest person he knew for the stuff she did, and she made everyone a better.
Did she accidentally just sign off?
I think so.
I think so.
Was cutting in and out a little bit. It could have been connectivity issues. But.
It could have been. Well, I know she has a really good story about Emma taking over Advocacy for herself, both high school and college. So we can get back to that. But Ian, if you want to go ahead and get started just to fill the space, and I will wait for Patty to see if she rejoins. So Ian's going to talk a little bit about from a perspective of being raised by a parent who really encouraged him to be independent and have those advocacy skills. So we're going to be very interested to hear your perspective, Ian.
Yeah, do we want to wait a second and see if she comes back? I don't want to
Oh, go ahead. I'm going to text her and try to help her get back on.
she may still be talking to us. Who knows?
She may be. She may not even know.
Yeah. Yes. It was really great hearing from me and Patty. FOP is obviously way different for the people who watch it versus the people who have it. And to some extent, both are really hard in different ways. And, I think for me, I was misdiagnosed at 4, properly diagnosed at 5. My family and I were living in Colorado. We were pretty isolated. My parents had this whole dream. I had just built their dream house, moved out there. My dad had left his big company in New Jersey and, had this whole trajectory they thought they were going to take after they had my brother and I. And obviously they had my brother first and that went smoothly. He does not have FOP. And then they had me. And my childhood wasn't really bad. Comparatively, it was great. But, they noticed some swelling, some toes, something, they knew something wasn't right. And to make a long story short, they ended up finding out that I had FOP and making the decision to abandon that dream house and abandon the plan and move back to New Jersey for better medical care. And so they sat my brother and I down. I was, I think, 4 or 5 at that point, and my brother is 3.5 years older, so he was 8 or something like that, 8 or 9. And my parents sat us down and said, we very simply explained FOP to me, kind of in creative ways that Nicky had mentioned. Little kids don't really care about science and all the details yet. They just need to know that they're a little bit different. And so my parents sat down and said, you guys can still do everything you want to do and be who you want to be, but you just got to be, a little bit more cautious, a little bit mindful of your surroundings and who you're doing it with and all these things. And, my brother and I were both nodding our head, and then they asked if either of us had any questions, and my brother's hand shot up and he asked if I was going to die. And my parents said, well, yeah, of course, everybody dies, but FOP isn't going to be the thing that kills me. And so he doesn't have to worry about FOP taking me from him. And they turned to me and asked if I had any questions, and I asked them if I could still eat candy. And so, priorities were slightly different. But I think kind of from that moment on, my parents realized that, yeah, it was going to be hard, and who knows what really lied ahead, but that if we just stuck together, we were going to be okay. And um, so, we moved back to New Jersey, and my parents, um, did the best they could with the resources and knowledge and everything that they had. Right. I mean, I think it's human nature as a parent to, when you learn something, is unusual with your kid, you want to do all the research, read everything there is, just be a sponge and absorb it. And then there's also this like instinct that kicks in and makes you want to reject it because it's not information you like, which is weird. But as a kid, like, at least being young, it's pretty easy for the first couple of years for me because, like, as a little kid, all your innocence is intact. You don't know what you're missing out on. You don't know what other people are doing. You're just focused on whatever you're focused on. And so as long as, you keep those small things, good, then I didn't have any perception that life was bad. I think um, as a kid, you kind of only learn to feel bad for yourself when other people do it first. And so it was when, I started going to school and I realized I was different. And, my parents would come in and talk to my classmates at the beginning of every year and just say, this is Ian, this is why it looks different. This is, the condition, and explain it obviously really basically because you're talking to 10-year-olds or whatever. But basic things like don't pull on his arms and push him over and stuff like that. And looking back on that, the effects of that were really interesting, right? On one hand, some people, it made me interesting to people, and so people would latch on to me and want to get to know me. On the other hand, people who were maybe a little bit more insecure with themselves totally rejected me and would make snide remarks or jokes or whatever, the nature of which I don't even remember. But it was a mix of all of it, right? Support, distance, judgment, intrigue, kind of all of it. And as we went on, I kind of figured out how to navigate that. And I realized that some people would latch on to me, just because I would get extra attention and they want to mooch on some of that extra attention, or I get extra time to eat lunch or whatever. So people would want to eat lunch with me and try to get extra lunch time. And, the social dynamics, and as you grow up, just really evolve. And when I hit middle school and high school, my left hip ossified in 8th grade. And that was really like the first big, just like bomb that was dropped on me. I had shoulders and plenty of restrictions, turning my head and bending and whatever. But up until that point, I could run around. And so I was just running around and doing stuff with kids. And I was just careful about getting hit or tripping or, whatever. But obviously when that, and I was good at soccer and I was doing all this stuff. And then, my left hip ossified and like that all got obliterated. And to me, it was like, oh my God, who am I? What do I do? I can't do any of these things that I thought were part of my identity. So, how do I figure that out and how do I navigate it and who am I going to do it with? And are those people going to like me if I can't play soccer? And realistically, I think I thought about it more than anybody else. And friendships and social dynamics just evolve just like they do with you know, able-bodied people who don't have FOP. I mean, middle school, high school, college, those are all such like personal learning experiences, and you have to make friends, and maybe you make friends that last a lifetime, and you make a friend that you think is the best friend, and they do something to you that, you know, really hurts. And but that's not exclusive to FOP. And you know, one of the interesting things that I went through was I had a really close friend. His name was Sam, and we used to just run. Like, all I remember is just running everywhere with him. We would run down the street. We would, am I back? You know, we'd run down the street, run in his yard, run down his driveway. And one day we were at this girl's house, and she had a really steep driveway, and it was newly paved, and he was riding his sister's bike, and I was just walking. And I said, "Oh, Sam, I bet I could race you down the driveway, me running and you riding your sister's bike." And he was like, "Okay." And I actually beat him down the driveway, but he yelled at me to get out of the way. So I kind of jumped out of the way, and he swerved the same way and ended up literally hitting me with the bike, and like riding up the back of my leg. I had like bloody tire marks on my leg. Like I obviously tumbled down the driveway and got a pebble in my knee, and whatever. It, all things considered, I don't even think I really had any FOP progression from that, which is fortunate. But what was interesting is I think my knee swelled up, and you know, maybe I was a little tender for a while or whatever. And Sam, that was the first time Sam really witnessed that anything beyond FOP just being words for me, and it totally freaked him out. And it was pretty much the end of the friendship. Not in a, for a while I was pretty angry about it. I didn't understand it, but I realized that it totally blindsided him, and that he felt responsible for it, and that he didn't realize the consequences were, you know, as steep as that. You know, it's not like I just scraped my knee and I went home. It was a bigger deal. We called my parents, blah blah blah. That, and so I think he kind of had this feeling like, holy shit, what I just do, and the like risk reward with this friend who at that point he cared about me, right? I was like his best friend. And so like he kind of taught me that like some people may move away from me because of FOP, but it's not because they don't like me. It's really the opposite. It's that they care so much about me, and they don't want to, they can't just watch it. And if they don't have a support group or an infrastructure around them where they can process it or talk or whatever with people, then all these weird feelings just fester with them, and they become like, he was just too scared to do anything with me after that point. And so we moved away, and we've talked you know, since. But you know, it's been really interesting to me. I'm now 31, and to look back on all the people I've met, and the friends I've made, and the friends I've kept, and the friends I've lost. And you know, some of it is just normal social stuff, some of it is FOP stuff, some of it you know, it is a mix of all of it. And I think I kind of had to navigate those things for myself, and figure out why I really thought, you know, things were happening. And you know, that was a big light bulb moment for me with Sam, to realize, oh, he actually does care about me, and he is the friend I thought he was. He just can't handle it. And that's important for him to take care of himself and move away from me. And he didn't want to make me feel responsible for it. And so it's really tricky. But you know, I met some of, I mean, friends that I'll keep for the rest of my life, freshman year in college. And you know, worked out with them and was going to the gym and, you know, going to parties and doing all the stuff. And then like my right elbow flared up and got so bad that I had to come home. And, you know, I came back and my right elbow was bent and I couldn't touch my face anymore and I couldn't work out and I couldn't do this. And my friends were all like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, it's just like this now. And they're like, but like, when's it get better? And I'm like, I don't know. It might not, like, you know, but I'm not going to hold my breath. And they're just like, holy shit. Okay. Like we gotta start figuring this out. And I, you know, I was going through the same turmoil of like, oh my God, how do they like me because I can work out in the gym with them and like all these arbitrary perceptions that I had come up with. And I went home and like all those guys would just come to my dorm and chill and watch Netflix and take a nap. And it didn't matter to them. I've never heard from any of them like, dude, I miss working out with you. And so that was, you know, something in my head more than someone else's head. And I think the way that, you know, my parents did a really good job of making me aware that my consequences would be steeper than probably most of my peers, if not all of them, but they didn't like make me deal with that yet. You know, kind of like Nicky had mentioned earlier, like you just can't live like well, what if this happens and what if that happens and whatever. It's really crazy. And, you know, the kind of the comparison is, you know, if you don't have FOP and you're an able-bodied person in this chat, kind of like think about going to the grocery store or going to get gas or whatever and going, oh my God, what if I get in a car accident and someone hits me head on and I die? It's like, realistically, that's in the cards. It's in the cards for anybody in any car or anywhere. And yet most people don't think about that, because if you trap yourself with all that fear that doesn't have to exist yet, then you're never going to do anything. And so maybe, you know, maybe you cut out a bunch of experiences in your life that didn't need to be cut out. And, you know, my parents did an amazing job letting me do things differently and encouraging me to do that and brainstorm how I could do something, or they said no. You know, obviously if I said, hey mom, I want to go play in the NFL, she'd say, yeah, no. But, you know, if it was just run around with my friends or go to this pool party or whatever, it was a lot of discussion and compromise. And like, yes, it absolutely gets exhausting to micromanage so many little things, but I would rather, like, that micromanaging isn't really optional, right? Like it can be a lot of work to just watch TV and get set up comfy on the couch. So like that micromanaging and that extra effort isn't really optional. So if that's going to get applied across the board, why not invest that effort and time and resources into things that are going to be a real memory? And you know, even something like the instance I just dealt with Sam, I was screaming and crying and whatever, but like I still look back on that memory and laugh and go, oh, we were so stupid and, you know, whatever. And so, you know, it's a tricky balance for everybody. And I think the more, obviously, if you have a really young kid, it gets hard because you don't know, you know, there's less dimensions to everything. And you don't know when they're going to have a light bulb moment and kind of figure out another layer, and then you approach that layer. But, you know, look, as parents, I think encouraging out of the box thinking and, you know, advocating in the sense that, you know, my parents would say stuff like, well, if it doesn't work for you, like speak up, say something to the teacher or whatever. And You know, I ended up needing like a personal aide in school just to help with little stuff. And they totally made me manage that relationship from like the time I was 10. And so now, you know, I manage 2 employees on a weekly basis. I do all their payroll, I do all their scheduling, like, and it's still a lot of work, but I don't really think anything of it. And so they just got me ready for those management skills. And whether that was an aide or managing family or friends or anybody that was going to help, it wasn't, they didn't target it as like, hey, learn how to manage this person in your life because this person will be around forever, because that's not real. It was, hey, you're gonna need help from people, and who helps you is gonna change over time. And so you need to get really comfortable with the help you need and communicating about that, and learn how to navigate those conversations with whoever you have around you. And, you know, I could do that with, you know, teachers and aides in middle school and high school. And then, you know, I went to college and I had 2 aides that I thought were like the best. And then they both just got busy and stopped showing up. And it was like, oh my God, I got to figure all this out. And I ended up calling my friends and saying, hey man, can you do this? And can you do that? And I went from having 1 aide to having 6 friends help me with the same amount of work, but it was so I didn't tire anybody out or burn it out. Or, you know, I'm very cautious about having, you know, what I ask for certain people, because I think certain people are comfortable with it and certain people aren't. And the more we can respect, you know, those boundaries, I think it's really good. I remember my parents when I was, I think in middle school, high school, they made some comment to me like, oh, well, do you talk to your friends about FOP? And I said, well, not really. And they're like, well, you know, you should. And I was like, well, they all know about it. And I said, but like, that's not why we're friends. And so I said, I've made the blanket statement that I'm comfortable talking about it to anybody who wants to talk about it, but that I'm not going to talk about it because it's my least favorite part about myself. And it's just not what I want to spend my energy on. So if somebody else has a question or a concern or whatever, bring it up and I'll talk about it. Otherwise, you're not going to hear me talk about it. And my mom was like, oh, well, you're hiding it and this and that. I said, Mom, like, it's not necessarily that deep. Like, I just have friends that I talk to about it. I have friends I don't talk to about it. I have friends that I talk to occasionally about it. Like, I need all those people in my life. I can't have every conversation start with how's FOP, how are you feeling, blah blah blah. It's like, that sucks. And so I said, if I'm in a flare up, I don't want to talk about FOP. I want to talk about something else. So I need friends that I can call and say, yo, what's up, dude? And they'll go, oh, you see the game today, blah, 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 blah. And I go, that snaps me out of it and makes me feel like a real person, as opposed to just every conversation I'm like a vending machine where, and I think that took my parents a long time to kind of realize that even through college, my mom was like, oh, well, why don't you talk about it and whatever? I said, because they don't want to talk about it, Mom. Like, you love gardening. Do you talk to everybody you talk to about gardening? Like, no, you talk to your friends who you know love plants and flowers and nature. And so like that same intuition exists with me. Like my after college, I went through a really rough flare up, and the first time I really saw a bulk of my friends was at our beach house. And my friend had come from Buffalo, hadn't seen him since college, and brought his new girlfriend who's going to be his wife, like a big introduction. And they met in med school, and I was not in great shape. My leg was, you know, rock solid. I was like wearing a dirty t-shirt and sweatpants, you know, not really feeling myself, just trying to be around people that I knew would snap me out of it. And he introduced her to me, And she came up to me in a room just by myself and said, Ian, you know, Ryan told me a little bit about FOP and said you're in a flare up with your left hip. Can I touch it? And I was just like, whoa, yeah, sure, like whatever. And, you know, it kind of took me off guard, but it made me realize, like, oh, she's just genuinely interested. And so there was nothing preventing her from talking to me about it. And so for me to walk out in that room and be the exact same person in the exact same outfit and have other people not ask me, they don't want to. And so I don't need to go there with them. And I think having that gauge has helped me navigate social things really well, because I'm a social person. I like people. I like learning about them and whatever, but it gets really tough to separate, you know, the noise in your own head versus the noise from other people, and what's your insecurities and what are other people's insecurities, and, you know, what are all the motives and all the ingredients. And, you know, I think I tried to make it, you know, as playful as I could with meeting new people. You know, if someone said something ridiculous to me, I didn't like snap and be like, oh my God, how could you say that? Like, I gave people a little bit of slack. And, you know, I met a girl in high school who really liked me from another town, and we were talking about FOP, and she's like, so, you know, what's the deal? And I was like, well, you know, basically my body can turn muscle, tendons, ligaments, and other connective tissues into bone, and I gradually, you know, my movement's gradually restricted over time. And I said, you know, you have any questions? And she goes, yeah, so can you go hiking, rock climbing, and bowling? And I was just like, oh man, like you didn't hear anything I just said. And yet I didn't need to be like, oh, you idiot, blah, blah, blah. Like, I was just like, oh no, those would be on the list of activities I can't do. But, you know, here are some of the things I can do. And, you know, just let people explore it for themselves, because people are trying to be innocent. People are often innocent, coming from an innocent place. And even if they say something edgy or maybe insensitive or whatever, understand that most of the time it really just comes from them trying to have a conversation or trying to break the silence or wanting to make some move. And so they make one. And then if we just automatically judge them for making the wrong move, then they just clam up and they won't make a move again. And so I think, you know, giving people a little bit of slack when it comes to that is important. And, you know, not putting the person with FOP in a box where this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, this is what'll happen, this is what won't happen, because like nobody knows any of that. And even still, research is so much farther along than when I was 5, and it's still a lot of gray area. And, you know, I remember in high school, my parents made some comment to me like, oh, well, would you want to, you know, do this or go there or do this before some FOP event happened? And I sat them both down and go, guys, what's going on? I go, either you know more than I know, in which case spill the beans, or you don't know any more than what I know or anybody else knows, and you guys are just being cautious, in which case keep the conversation to yourself and let me manage that whenever I have to manage that. Like, it's not like for the person with FOP, like, you know, you're going to have shitty days, but having the conversation of what are you going to do if tomorrow's shitty? like that now ruins tomorrow and today. And whereas if you just go, you know, if things are hard, this is the toolbox we're going to go into, and you grow that toolbox over time, and you can still go, hey, today's one of those shitty days, but at least we have the toolbox. I found that to be a lot more productive than like trying to save the kid from something that hasn't happened yet, because it's just weird. It's like I totally understand it from a parent's perspective, but it's so like toxic to the kid's experience and growth, because that's, you know, that's really stemming from the parents' fear and not the kids. And let, you know, I think the best thing to do if you're a parent is to, you know, try to model and talk to your kid in a way that they'll grow up and trust themselves. And so whether you guys are around or caregivers are around, or they have to find new people or friends or whatever, it's like they're confident enough within themselves to navigate whatever they need. And those communication skills and people management skills are super valuable. And
Ian, can I interrupt you?
Yeah,
just for
sorry.
the sake of time. No, I loved what you were talking about, and your message is actually what I discovered putting together this series, is that I thought it would be advocacy of, you know, who do you call, what do you do? But ultimately, like you said, it's about relationships and communication and just learning how to speak up when you need to. So I loved your message. I did want to give, if some of you need to leave, I totally understand, but I do just want to hear quickly, maybe Patty, if you want to just give one brief story about how Emma started to take on some of those things, just like Ian was talking about how she kind of started to speak up on her own. I would love to share that, and then we'll wrap things up.
Where did I stop when I got cut off?
If you will just maybe share, I loved your story that you shared with me about how you helped Emma kind of come into her own in high school when she kind of wanted you to solve an issue. I think you had told me it was either the lunch story or the elevator story, that she wanted you to jump in and do it or go to the principal, but you kind of explained to her, you know, helped her come to her own solution. So if you'd share that briefly,
Yeah.
and then we'll wrap up.
I mean, just when Emma got to high school, I did not do any advocating for her much at all. I never knew what happened to her during the day. Sometimes teachers or friends would say something, and that's the only way I would know there'd been things happen, but Emma would not tell me. Some things that did happen, she did tell me one day, well, she can't go up in the elevator anymore in the morning. I would drop her off early because there were kids that were putting the garbage cans, the janitor's garbage cans, in the elevator each day. It was a prank. They were standing off to the side. They were giggling. They were watching her not be able to get upstairs for her first class. So she said, she told me I was going to have to come in every morning with her and go to the elevator, clean out the garbage cans. I said, no, Emma, I don't think that's the answer. I said, should you tell somebody so it can be solved? And she did not want to tell the principal. She didn't want the punishment. It was me that said, well, why don't you think of someone else to tell? So she ended up telling a really liked art teacher who taught right close by to that elevator. You know, she said, can you just wander by? When you see me zip by your doorway, your classroom, can you just go by and come by and look at the elevator? And so sure enough, it was kind of solved by him having her back. So it was better than having the punishment, I think, of going to the principal and having it be a scene. And then, I don't know if I have time, but the other one is a cafeteria one that's kind of fun. I mean, just that Emma used to have nobody to sit with in the cafeteria. There was one table, They moved it so a wheelchair could fit in. It was crowded lunchroom. She'd often sit all by herself. She would just leave early and go to her next class. All of her good friends had different lunch periods because there were staggered lunches. So her good friends were in other classes. The other friends were off gallivanting and flirting and doing what kids do. And Emma was stuck in this one place. So for 2 years, she didn't have anybody. And then all of a sudden, one semester, she was bubbly and happy when I would pick her up and tell me all the gossip and stuff. Her friends had lunch with her. And it was, as a mother, I was just what you want, to have your kid happy, coming home. And then the staff put a new table in and moved her 10 feet away from her friends. They put a table in between her friends and where she had to sit. And Emma was just devastated. So I said, well, what do you think you can do? And so she had asked, and the teachers had said, well, if you get to have a good time at lunch, so do these other kids. So they moved other wheelchair kids in between. And so I said, well, what would your friend do? If they did this to Jamie, which is a spunky classmate that she had, I said, what would she do? And Emma said, well, she'd do something about it. So the next day, Emma and her friends moved to another table, and Emma had gone to the janitor, got him to rearrange tables and make it so her and her friends could move to another table. And they made the teachers were so upset. And they made her feel like she was being aggressive and a troublemaker and going about, but she said, I just want to sit with my friends like everyone else does. I shouldn't have to give that up. So they made her feel aggressive. And Emma was the most kind person. She liked these kids. She just wanted to have things that she wanted. And that's what I would have done too. I mean, Emma sort of learned from me to sometimes just play the game or something, figure out who to go to. That janitor was so glad to move Emma to a different table so Emma could have a good lunch. The teachers were upset that Emma went and solved her own problem on her own. But they were advocating for all students. Emma needed to advocate for herself. I mean, Emma did the right thing, I think, to figure it out. So I don't know if you want me to not talk about it anymore, just that when Emma went to college, I really did not help her at all. Disability Services Office was there for her, and she went to them and did all this with them. I had to advocate for her because she had to learn how to manage PCAs because she hadn't done that very much at home. I had done most of that, and it did take her a while. I did have to move down with her, which was the horror of horrors, to move into a freshman dorm room with your daughter. But we could not find PCAs. It took a semester, half a year. We did finally find them after a lot of work, and then it worked out fine. And I only went down once a month and stayed for a couple of days with her. But she advocated, I would say, 100% for herself in college, except for PCAs. Emma went to a school and had PCAs that were students. It was a med school. When you hire only students, there are a lot of young emotions, busy kids, lots of stuff happening. And so there was some managing of personalities and Emma standing up for herself and things. Again, just that Emma, I think, has changed the world, just like all kids probably do. But just by being there, by persisting, advocating for herself, just her guidance counselor had said, just seeing her ride down the hall in her wheelchair, knowing that she's out there, advocating for herself, makes this whole world a better place, makes the school a better place. Everyone looks at her and is glad she's doing it. So that's it, I guess.
Thank you, Patty. No, I'm glad you got to
Glad if I went.
No, not at all. I'm glad that you got to share those stories because I think what the lesson is that advocacy it's a process and nobody knows how to do it correctly. It's kind of a trial and error type thing, and not one way of doing it is going to be right for everyone. So thank you all for taking the time to share your stories, your personal stories. I definitely appreciate it. And if you are interested in any more resources that we have for the Advocacy at All Ages topic, if you didn't hear the podcast last month, that's something to definitely go back and listen to, because I interviewed Ian's mom, Ian Cali, on kind of how she handled parenting and different things she did for promoting advocacy. And then there are some resources more for younger parents on that same website where the podcast is, for how to start talking to your child about advocacy, and they don't even understand what that word is, but some ways that you can incorporate that into parenting. So check out those resources on there. And then next month, I'm excited to say that we have a health psychologist. Her name is Dr. Samira Riaz, and she is in the UK, and she's going to kind of be talking about how you balance raising a child with a rare disease. And she actually has a little bit of experience with FOP. She has seen a few patients in the UK through some of her research, but how you balance advocating for a child, helping them when they have a rare disease, but also just advocating and just being there for their mental health, and sometimes treating them like they don't have FOP, and how you kind of juggle that as a parent. So I'm really excited to have her next month. I believe we've settled on June 30th, but next week I will for sure be announcing the date that we will be having her. So definitely check out our website and look for those resources. And thank you again for attending, everyone. It's been a lot of fun.